Ideologies. And for that cause, guess what they did? They said Jesus was born of virgin birth. And Joseph and Mary didn't have no sexual relationship. God just said, come on, Jesus, and you born. That don't make sense. It don't make sense to me. What it meant was there was a Essene brotherhood. And Mary and Joseph was a part of the Essene brotherhood. The Essene brotherhood was those that was living according to the word of God. And when Jesus was born, he was untouched. The virgin is pure and has been untouched. Because when you begin to look at that book that I told you about, you will see that Jesus was walking one day. And there was a sister that looked real fine, just like you. And when she was walking, Jesus got caught up. See, because Jesus had to go through all the ways of life too, just like you all did. He got caught up because of the music and the beauty of this sister. And Jesus said, man, let me go and get myself together. So all of us have to go through all the ways of life. We all have certain characters in us. And we got to get these things out of us to be able to be one with our Father God Allah. Islam. In this age, there is still much religious controversy as to the right thing. Big and powerful ministers have come to the conclusion that something is wrong. Some say it is the 10 Commandments. Others say that there is a lack of sincerity in the purpose of the churches. Still others think that it is worthless and not fit for the time that it takes to attend them. However, whatever the final decision might be, it is certain that they would make a change, or rather, try to make one. The fact of the matter is, if they have had only a reflection of the truth and not the real thing, like one who holds up to the sun a mirror and casts a few of its diverted rays in a different direction, so have they done with the truth that is supposed to have come from the east. There are but few people who know what the truth is about man, and that few know that it will be foolish to try to impart it to the ignorant. Although the ignorant has finished college, here's a fool right on being trained to jump through the hoops. The longer he stays in the schools, the better he can jump, and the more bitter would he defend his jumping. From the east comes all light. Though the sun is hanging at high noon, the blind cannot see the light. The same as the Islamic creed brought to the Asiatic to North America by Prophet Noble Drew Allah, who offered to those who were sick at heart, tried for many years, yet they are blind and cannot see the light. Nor the prophet trying to put new wine in old skin, for he knows that it will burst them, yet he had the remedy for the nations. The same remedy brought by Jesus, Muhammad, Buddha, and Confucius, which remedy is the truth. The nations do not want the truth. It is too stern. But until they accept it and find out where it truly is, there will continue to be religious controversy. At this time, I'd like to recite the Morse Markin prayer, the source from which I draw my strength. Allah, the Father of the universe, the Father of love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice. Allah is my protector, my guide, and my salvation, by night and by day, through his holy prophet, Drew Ali. Amen. First of all, I like to rise to give praise to Allah. I like to give praise to Allah because it was He who was the Father of the universe. It is who and He who is the Father of the seen and the Father of the unseen. I like to give honor to Allah's holy and illustrious prophet, Noble Drew Ali. I like to give honor to Prophet Noble Drew Ali because it was this brother who reached down into the watery grave of hatred, slander, lewdness, murder, theft, and everything that harms to set you and me back upright on our feet again. I'd like to give honor to the forerunner to the Prophet Noble Drew Ali, Marcus Mosai Garvey. I'd like to give honor to Marcus Mosai Garvey because this brother had to have pure thoughts in order to pave the way for love. I'd like to give honor to all literature pertaining to Islam in the Moorish Science Temple of America. I'd like to give honor to our two flags, Just Soli and Just So Quintus, a right of soil and a right of blood. And I'd like to give honor to this Moorish Holy Quran, which is also known as the Book of the Seven Seals, that none was able to open and read from its sacred pages the messages of purity and love. And this evening I'd like to read from 2 verses out of the Book of the Seven Seals, the Moorish Holy Quran. And the first chapter that I would like to read from is chapter 3. And chapter 3 is verse 23, and it's on page 20, on page 8. And it reads on this wise: the David of the light is purity, who slays the strong Goliath of the dark, and seats the Savior love upon the throne. We have just had a reading from the Moorish Holy Quran, divinely prepared by our Holy Prophet Noble Drew Ali for our earthly and our divine salvation. I'd like to read another chapter. I'd like to read from chapter 12 of this Moorish Holy Quran. And chapter 12 reads on this wise. I read from chapter 12, and I read from verses 8 and 9. And 8 and 9 reads on this wise. And Jesus said, my brother man, your thoughts are wrong. Your heaven is not far away, and it is not a place of mirths and bounds. It is not a country to be reached. It is a state of mind. Allah never made a heaven for man. He never made a hell. We are creators and make our own. Thus we just had a reading of the Moorish Holy Quran, the source from which I draw my strength. Indeed, it's always an honor, a pleasure, moreover a duty, to be able to come before our Portland listening audience and talk to you about the last prophet in these days and time, Prophet Noble Drew Ali. My subject matter today is Sunday school, because Noble Drew Ali told the Moors that out from your Sunday school come the guidance of the nation. And when we begin to talk about Sunday school, not only do we exercise our 5 senses, we also exercise our 7 senses. And Noble Drew Ali talk about our earthly and our divine salvation. So today, I want to talk to you about this Moorish Holy Quran because it's important that I do. Because whenever a prophet comes, they come with 3 things: the kitta, the huklam, and the nudliwa. You'll find all these 3 words in the Holy Quran of Mecca. But what I want to do right now is talk about this Moorish flag again. And it's important that I talk about this Moorish flag because I see a lot of people all around Portland and all around the world. They begin to wear this Moorish flag. They begin to wear it, and they begin to wear it proudly. And I like seeing them wear it, but then sometimes I don't like seeing them wear it, because there was a time when you used to see Moors wearing that flag, then they was under one thought pattern. But now you see a million different thought patterns under that one flag, and I can understand that. I could understand that because really, when Noble Drew Ali came on the scene and before the Moorish Science Temple of America was established, that flag there, the same flag that's flying in Morocco today, was not being flown in Morocco. It was taken down. And it was Noble Drew Ali who went to the president and retrieved this flag. And he said when he first got it and looked at the star, the mothballs had ate it up. So we want to talk about that right now because I think it's important that we do, because you hear a lot of brothers and you hear a lot of sisters talking about the national side, talking about the national side of the Moorish Science Temple of America when it ain't no such thing. Because when Noble Drew Ali was sent to this earth by the great God Allah to restore upon you and me that which was lost, he brought us two things. He brought us that flag and he brought us the American flag. Now we know that the American flag, you look at your back, you see many stripes. But this flag is the flag that is protecting us in our infancy and our ignorance. Through the great God Allah, this flag is protecting us to give us enough time to get ourselves together. Now, when you begin to talk about the national side of the Moorish Science Temple of America from your perspective, what you are doing is you are not giving yourself leverage to be able to step to the nations of the earth to talk about anything. Because everybody today is talking about reparation. And you want to go to the government and talk about reparation. And you're going to talk about reparation and you're going to go talking about what transpired through the Atlantic slave trade. But you only have half of the pie. You cannot just go to him and talk about this national side and then you're going to go to him with your collar turned around backwards saying that you're a Christian in the church. Now, Drew Ali told us, we're not talking about Christianity, but everybody knows that the foundation of Christianity began in Rome. And it was the Roman nations that founded the first church, of whom crucified Jesus of Nazareth for seeking to redeem the people from under the Roman yoke and law. Now, what is the Roman yoke and law? The Roman yoke and law is the customs, the culture, the heritages, and the traditions of the European nation. And Drew Ali told us it was the first church of whom crucified Jesus of Nazareth for seeking to redeem his people from under the Roman yoke and law. So now we're going to go to somebody and say we want reparation. So you owe us because you took us out of one place and brought us to another, but you can't go to them with half of the meal. Noble Drew Ali came. He said that we were 3/5 of a man. And the book said that in mathematics, because mathematics come out of Egypt. Mathematics didn't come out of Europe. And before I get back into that, I remember early 70s when we used to hear them say that Drew Ali say, get a good European education. And Drew Ali said, if you get a good European education, then I'll be able to use you. Then all of the brothers and all of the sisters, we was running to school to get a good European education, but we fail to realize that when you say you're going to school to be a mathematician, that's not European. When you say you're going to school to be a doctor, that's not European. All of these come out of Egypt. So when Noble Drew Ali said get a good European education and he could use you, he was talking about me. And the reason why he was talking about me, because I lived hatred, slander, lewdness, murder, theft, and everything that harms, which are the attributes of Lucifer, Satan, devil, dragon, and beast. And Drew Ali told me once I get these things out of me and remember from which I came, then I have that education. Then you'll have a good European education, because when I was doing all those things that was diametrically opposed to what God said do, then that means that I was living a European thought pattern, because there was a time when the whole world was called Asia. And now that you begin to investigate, you begin to look at Pangea. You've been looking at a lot of other things that tell you about the particular landmass. So now, I was in a meeting this morning. I was in a meeting this morning with some people that said that they was somewhat familiar with Noble Drew Ali. But they never had a Moorish Quran, never seen a Moorish Quran, didn't know a Moorish Quran existed. And if that's the case, then you don't have a good understanding of what Noble Drew Ali brought us, because when we begin to talk about going to see Rome, because in this Moorish Quran, we have Roman numbers because we're still under the thought pattern of the European nation, which is Rome. When you begin to talk about the Vatican, you know, Drew Ali was telling us one time that these teachings are for our earthly and our divine salvation. But he said, while the Europeans only have an earthly salvation. And the reason why they have an earthly salvation, because they done took my Jesus. They done buried my Jesus in Vatican Square and took on the name. So if you steal something from me and falsehood is walking around in truth clothing, then that means that something is missing in your character. That's why when the Vatican got their constitution, a year after Noble Drew Ali established the Moorish Science Temple of America in 1929, they had to do it then because they didn't have the wisdom. They didn't have the knowledge. They didn't have the understanding of how to put this together. That's why you find all these dudes with the national side, you giving Rome all of this stuff that they forgot that was in existence. They didn't know anything about, and you're waking them up. So this flag right here, if you fly this flag, you have to fly it under the Moorish Science Temple of America. You can't fly it under anything else because Drew Ali said he signed up to go a certain way. And he told us this too. He said the citizens of all free national governments, according to their national constitution, are all of one family bearing one free national name. He said those who fail to recognize the free national name of their constitutional government are classed as undesirables and is subject to all inferior names, abuses, and mistreatment that the citizens care to bestow upon them. And it is a sin for any group of people to violate the national constitutional laws of a free national government and cling to the name and principles that delude to slavery. So now we're talking about citizenship. We're talking about the citizens of all free national governments, according to the national constitution, are all of one family bearing one free national name. What is the free national name? My free national name is American. And all citizens under this great melting pot, your free national name is America because you're under this government. We are Moorish Americans, and we are Moorish because we are descendants of Moroccans and born in America. You can't claim the whole continent of Europe, just like I told you, Somalia, Ethiopia, they was never put into slavery. And the slave trade came through West Africa. Now, Drew Ali tells us about the northwestern and the southwestern shores of Africa. And he's telling us that this is where the slave trade came about. So when we go to Rome and sit down and talk to the European nations, one thing you have to do, you can't carry Christianity with you. Now, we're not hung up in the name because the 23rd Psalm says he leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. So you got to be still to hear. But man, today is what his forefathers were yesterday. And there's no one who is able to change man from the decent nature of his mother and father unless his power extend beyond the great universal creator, Allah himself. I had a conversation with my mother years ago. And she said that the reason why a lot of things was accepted so that we'll be here today. Because if they would not have accepted certain things and held themselves up and took their titty and put it in the European mouth, we all be dead right now. So right now, I don't have to worry about that because there's Moors everywhere. There's Moorish science temples everywhere, but it ain't but one. I have a red fez on. This is about the second time I wore red fez in maybe 30 years. And the brother asked me, he said, why are you wearing a red flag? Are you going back to what you supposed to did originally? Because we was told here that the only fez that you supposed to wear is a red one. But see, I have a different understanding than that because my instructor was raised by a brother that Drew Ali put a black fez on his head. And when we was raised as muftis. We was raised as lawmen. We was raised as law abiders. And we also have an election every year. So if a Jew Ali appointed you today, don't mean he's going to appoint you tomorrow, because this is a everlasting movement. This is not a movement just start one day. Everybody hearing about the Moorish Science Temple and thinking that this is something brand new. This is something that nobody heard before. But when Allah, in his infinite wisdom, will send somebody to this earth to redeem us from that which was lost, or to hook us back up with the family of nations, what he gonna bring us is nationality. Because everybody have a nationality except you and me. Ain't nothing big about that. But I know Drew Ali told us, don't say that we don't need no driver's license. We don't need to go down to the court. And we don't need this. He told us to obey the laws of the government because he knew them Europeans would kill you. And we need ourselves so we can hear for the babies. Because we're living for the children. It ain't about you, it ain't about me. But we're citizens of this government just like everybody else. We're not scot-free. That same scot-free in the Dred Scott decision, Dred Scott never got free because he never proclaimed his nationality. Now I read today about the David of the Light, who slew the strong Goliath of the dog and seeks to save his love upon the throne. Now we're talking about David and Goliath now. When I grew up, I thought that David was a little old dude, had a lot of heart, and this big old dude Goliath, he was running around in town leaning on people, and he kept messing with David. They said, I'm going to get this chump. So David had a slingshot, and he seen Goliath, said, I'm going to get this chump right now, ain't nobody looking. And he took a slingshot and hit Goliath in the head and knocked him out. But I'm seeing another lesson now. Because when Drew Ali had me to go look up David, then I come up with somebody else. Not only did I come up with David, not only did I come up with John the Baptist, who got his head cut off, I come up with Saul. Saul got his head cut off just like David. And the same place that Abraham went to sacrifice his son in front of the great God Allah is the same place that Saul got killed. And they killed Saul. And Noble Drew Ali tell us about the northwestern and the southwestern shores of Africa, and then he was talking about who was governing a portion of Palestine at that time. All this had to do with your history. All this had to do with my history, because Drew Ali said from the east comes all light. And though the sun is hanging at high noon, the blind cannot see the light. The same as the Islamic creed brought to the Asiatics of North America by Prophet Noble Drew Ali, who offered to those who were sick at heart. So now when we're talking about the Philistines, and when we begin to talk about Saul, or when we begin to talk about anything that has something to do with the Philistines, we've come to find out that's a particular people. That just wasn't no one guy that we're talking about named David and Goliath. Goliath was a Philistine, and they were leaning on us, trying to take charge of us, trying to win out certain things. So when Drew Ali gave us this lesson, he had to take us back to the biblical scriptures. See, before you could step, that's why he came and he was dressed a certain way. He showed us who our forefathers were and what they brought to us. So he's telling us that when we go to the cares of the world and when we present our case, we have to go talk about nationality and we have to talk about divine creed. And when you begin to talk about divine creed, you're talking about Jesus, you're talking about Muhammad, you're talking about Buddha, and you're talking about Confucius. That's why we say Islamism, which is the doctrine, which is the spirit. So when you say Jesus, when you say Muhammad, when you say Buddha, or when you say Confucius, you are talking about the same reincarnated spirit. But you got to understand too, when you talk about Muhammad, then what? You going back to Abraham and Sarah, when she couldn't have children, and then she had a son by named Ishmael. Okay, now Drew Ali tell us Japanese and Chinese. And when you begin to hear us talk about Japanese and Chinese, when you look into the oral statements. I love that brother for that. That brother, everybody claiming that they bought the oral statement. That brother Loveville did that, and he did it at a time when we was young and we was growing, coming up. And when that brother came with the oral statements, of the Prophet Noble Ali, a lot of things was made clear because these was brothers and sisters that was in the movement with Drew Ali, and Drew Ali told them certain things because everything Drew Ali written down is not on paper because he written down on the dial place of heaven. He didn't tell you every time he went to the bathroom. So now you have a lot of people say, yeah, we studied Noble Drew Ali, but we studied Noble Drew Ali, and the teachings that we have is just for a few of us. It's not for everybody. Man, we got something for the world. Drew Ali said he took the covers off of all secret organizations. So Drew Ali came because we can't go into the courtroom. You can't go into the courthouse unless we go together. We going as a family. We going as a Moorish family. I always hear brothers say, I need these many signatures. I need that many signatures. Once we come back under one head like the prophet left it, then we're going to have that signature that we have because nationality is the order of the day. Let's go back to being 3/5 of a man. You 3/5, if you go down there talking about reparation, then you got the wrong religion. Because somebody gave you a religion. They gave you one, they defined it for you, and the best part about it, they interpreted it for you. Just like I read that about David. I come to find out now that when you begin to talk about David and Goliath, you're talking about the two forces that's within you, the 2-page book with your higher self and your lower self. See, man have two selves. And I've been going through changes like this with my PTSD and even as a child because I was born like May the 22nd, right there on the cusp. And that means that you're dealing with the twin. So all my life I've been dealing with these two different kind of forces in my life, not knowing what they were, but through the teachings of the Prophet Noble Drew Ali, I could put things in perspective. But Drew Ali came. And when Drew Ali came, he came from Allah. And when he came from Allah, he brought us something that nobody else did. And what was that? Your nationality. You need a nationality to hook you back up with the family of nations. You cannot go and talk about reparations as a black man. You can't go and talk about reparations as a colored man. You can't go and talk about reparations as a Negro. You can't go and talk about reparations not even as an Afro-American. Because Africa is a continent with many different nations. What nation do you represent? You're not even saying West Africa. You saying that you're a black man. Remember I told you about Nikki Giovanni? Nikki Giovanni was a beautiful sister. Her, Angela Davis, and a lot of other different sisters. One right here in Portland. And Nikki Giovanni asked a question one time. She said, I'm studying my literature, and I'm seeing in my literature there was some people that was called Moors. But I don't hear anything about the Moors today. They got history when they was in Spain from 711 to 1492. And she said, when I begin to study about Ferdinand, Isabella, then I come up with Vespucius. I come up with Christopher Columbus. I come up with James Stewart. And James Stewart is the one that you call King James. So all you brothers talking about some reparation, and you want reparation, and you talking about that the European is doing this to you and me, but you got Santa Claus. You got Thanksgiving. You have Halloween. And you're excelling in celebrating these holidays, and you giving them to the children. You know what that means? That means you and I, we're more slaves than anybody else. Because when you begin to talk about slavery, you talk about mental slavery. Drew Ali said mental slavery, which you now have, need each and every one of you who think that your conditions can be better. So this is Sunday school. And say, out from your Sunday school come the guidance of the nation. You cannot guide the nation if you're talking about you're a Christian. You can't do that because I'm not talking about Christianity, and I'm not talking about our brothers and sisters that are Christians. Because Noble Drew Ali says some of his greatest followers are in the church. And I grew up with all my family in the church. And they were living a moral and clean life, more so than anybody else. So when Drew Ali was telling us that some of his greatest followers are in the church, that means because our brothers and our sisters in the church are living a moral and clean life. Like your brother Manyweather, the brother that's here, that comes on the show a lot. He's a Christian pastor, but he's more in tune with God than half of these Moorish Americans that I see around here, because all they want to do is beat up the government and get my baby killed. That's what you want to do. Because when you mess with the government, you mess with me. You put me in jeopardy. We trying all we can to put these 7 testers into our brothers and sisters, because Rome know their time is coming, because you already said that you going back to Europe and boxcars stinking. So we know what the revelation is telling us, but we also know that there's 7 tests. There's 7 tests that we have to overcome. And when you overcome these 7 tests, then you're in the world, but you're not of the world. These things of the world have no rule over you. And when Drew Ali went to Egypt, and when he went through the chamber in Egypt, they knew it was him because his name was in the pyramid. And they knew from time, because every 2,100 years one would come. So whenever a nation is in need for a prophet, Allah will send one. So he sent Drew Ali with a methodology that we needed to free us from mental slavery. So when we begin to talk about the slave name, Lynch is not the slave name. The slave name is Negro, colored, and black. I remember Merrill Lynch. And Merrill Lynch was bullish on America up there in the Wall Street. And then they had another James at the James River named Willie Lynch. And he taught the slaves there how to control their people. So when you begin to talk about a slave name, these names were given to us by slave holders in 1779 and lasted until 1865 during the time of slavery. Drew Ali told us that. They gave you some names, and when they did that, you separated yourself from the human family. All the time. I talk about my dog, which was a Mexican Chihuahua. And I was on my way to D.C. And I had a Great Dane and a German Shepherd and all that. And they left me at the airport. They said, all aboard for Mexico. And he said, I'll see you later, Poppy. I'm gone. And he went to Mexico. I'm still at the airport right now waiting for a Negro land, waiting for a colored land, waiting on a black land. Every people on this topside planet mud, Drew Ali gave them a geographical location to trace themselves back. And then he came and told you to kick over the tombstones. He said, kick over the tombstones of Negro, colored, and black. Because if you call yourself Negro, colored, and black, you have no place on earth. We're talking about names, we're talking about dates, and we're talking about issues. And I got a lot of friends. And a lot of friends of mine, they still talking about they black. But they remember when we went to school, if somebody called you black, you better know how to rumble. Now I want to tell you something that's very important too. I want to leave with this. Because something transpired a couple of weeks ago. And with some brothers supposed to be thorough, supposed to be gangsters, and with some brothers that was leaning on a lot of young brothers back in the day when they was in preparation centers or incarcerated, wherever they were, and you had a couple of brothers that was leaning on a lot of these young brothers. We had to set up an organization to bring the brothers in because I remember they was leaning on them. And I listen to brothers now call these dudes legends, and these dudes ain't nothing. You call them 11 because they probably went into you and you scared them because they could fight. Them dudes ain't nothing. They taking advantage of young brothers. They whipping them, taking their food. Them ain't dudes that trying to walk with God. You can't serve 2 masters at the same time. That's why my mother, and this is why your mother, is not in the Morris Sign Temple. Because they know their children. They know their niece. They know their nephew. They know you not living a moral and clean life. They know you wearing the fez, and they know you in the gang too. You want to be with the prophet, but you want to be in the gang too. You can't serve 2 masters at the same time. When you do that, they got that word. You are the mental precox. You mentally deranged like me. See, I got the PTSD and I got all this crazy stuff. And you mentally deranged. On Thursday, you a gangster, but on Friday, you want to be with Drew Ali. You can go in the temple, and you know what it is? Jesus was talking about one time that he was in the chamber. And he said when he was in the chamber, he had a lot of hissing sounds. And that's the same thing within the temple or within whatever you're doing. If you say that you living the moral and clean life, walking with Drew Ali, and you don't do that, then you ain't who you say you was. Drew Ali said 2 hours in the up-to-date library. So what we have to understand, you can't fly one of those flags. You have to fly both of them. Drew Ali said he signed up or go a certain way. And you know, when I joined the temple, they had the Black Panthers was going real strong. And they just said, man, what's wrong with them Moors over there flying that flag? Why are they flying that flag when they know that we've been whipped? But see, Drew Ali said this flag protecting us in our infancy and our ignorance. Then somebody said, well, why are you flying the flag the way that you flying, because when Drew Ali was on the scene, there was no United Nations. But right now, the law, I learned that in the military. They say there's no flag right of the American flag. We know what it is because we talking about it in the chamber, but you don't do that in the public. So what we need to learn to do, we need to get into Drew Ali's literature. We need to try to read this literature. You know, Drew Ali said in the Moorish American prayer that Allah is my protector, my guide, and my salvation. And it says salvation is a ladder reaching from the heart of Allah to the heart of man. And it had 3 steps. It said belief is first. And this is what man thinks perhaps is true. You know how you say you believe something, but you're not true, but you think it, you believe it. And then it say faith is next. And this is what man knows is true. You know, through scientific study and investigation, you begin to labor for your reward, and you begin to see that the things that Drew Ali brought to us is true. Then you begin to have faith in it. And once you begin to have faith in it, then you're walking with it now. And then you becoming fruition. Fruition is man himself being the truth. Can man become fruition on this plane of things made manifest? Yes, he can. How can he do that? Well, I've seen you overcome some foes that I have yet to overcome, and I've overcome some foes that you haven't. So I see now that we can overcome these things. All we have to do is will it, because the will of man make possible the actions of the Holy Breath. And when the will of Allah and the will of man become one, then the resurrection is the fact. Resurrection means rising above the dead. What do that mean? That means coming out of your lower self into your higher self. Jesus said that. Jesus said you have to change from flesh to flesh, the flesh divine. And how do you change from flesh to flesh, the flesh divine? You do that by being the message that you bring. They said, what is a prophet? It said a prophet is a thought of Allah manifested in flesh. It said, what is an angel? It said, angel is a thought of Allah manifested in human flesh. Then it said, what is our prophet to us? And the lesson is, he is an angel of Allah who was sent to bring us the everlasting gospel of Allah. And the everlasting gospel is a saving power that comes from Allah through our ancient fathers by his prophet. So you could change at will. Whatever you do, man have a will to choose. I told the brother this morning, I had Satan with me this morning, him and the devil. Both of them came this morning. The other week, Satan just came. But the devil came with him this morning. And they came by my house. And both of them had a Quran this time. They had a Quran in their hand. I just got these Quran from Wimbley Hill. And I gave Lucifer one and I gave Satan one. And they sat down and they was listening, and they started asking questions. They started asking about the gospel. They started asking about the resurrection of the dead. And see, there was a time when they had me. And I hate to say, the devil made me do it. But when that chump grabbed me in my car, I said, let me tell you something, chump. I ain't nobody to make you do nothing. I called you, and you came. The will of man make possible the actions of the Holy Breath. Stop giving me the beat. You doing that on your own. And that's why Drew Ali came. When Drew Ali was in the chamber, he came out of there with those 7 tests. That's what he came to give us, telling us that once we overcome these things of the world, then we walking above water. We walking above the watery grave. It tells you that in the book about the watery grave of carnal things. So now, we're in at war with the European. We're at war with sin and crime. Whoever is about sin and crime, then that's who we is again. I'm every day. I'm with the dudes every day that's hustling. They're getting money. They're on the strip. They're doing that. But I'm with these dudes every day. You know why? Because that's where I'm at. That's where my mind is at. And I'm still trying to serve 2 masters at the same time. You can't serve 2 masters at the same time because Satan is a master. He is a mastermind. And the prophet told us, he said that the devil can do mighty things. He said, did not the Gentile magicians do great things before the Pharaoh? He said, my words and deeds in all the walks of life shall be the proof of my messiahship. And Messiah is one that was sent from God. So now I'm looking at you and I'm looking at me. And I remember when the sheiks used to call us Lord, because a man is the Lord of the plane of things made manifest, meaning that you are able to master and govern these things down here on the plane of things made manifest. When they say that the Lord is my shepherd, who they talking about? They're talking about God. When they say the 23rd Psalm, the Lord is my shepherd, or the Lord is my light, they talking about God. Because we say that they're talking about Jesus when they say the Lord is my shepherd or the Lord is my light. That's who they talk. No, Jesus wasn't even born yet. I got to reiterate that. When Solomon and David was on the plane, Jesus wasn't even born yet. He hadn't got here yet. This is why Jesus was so strong, because you know how you go to the basketball arena and you look up there and see all these championships. When Jesus came, man, he had Abraham, he had Lot, he had David, he had Solomon, he had Jesse, he had all them dudes in his camp. You know, he had all them dudes that was playing on the team that he was playing. So that's why he come up so good, because he had all them brothers and sisters already right there. So they taught him. So, you know, when I hear about some of the great follow through which Jesus came, Drew Ali didn't mention Saul in that. And he was the one that fought strongly with the Philistines. You know, the same one that David had the beef with. But David, he got rid of them chumps. So what we're saying here in the Moorish Science Temple, see right here? Here goes Drew Ali. It tells you that in the book. It said 1 feet on the land and 1 on the sea. So Drew Ali brought you and me out of the watery grave. He said, come on and walk with me upon the waves. That's just like in chapter 17, when you first saw Jesus. And he was talking to Claudia and Judith, who was Europeans in Rome. He said, come on and walk with me upon the waves. This was Drew Ali is telling you and me to come on and walk with him upon the way. Let's stop drowning in the sin. See, that's the drowning. The drowning and you can't walk on water is because you're drowning in the sin. And how you drown in the sin? By not living according to love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice. Because we love our brothers and sisters and we tell them the truth. That they live in peace, have freedom, and justice will come to us all. So what we need to do right now, we need to work on ourselves. See, because Drew Ali told me about unity. And I'm always talking about unity. But it's through carnal thoughts and words and deeds. Man tore himself away from Allah. He debased himself. So I separate myself from God by not doing godly things. And when I do devilish things, then I am that devil. I looked in the mirror 100 times to see horns coming out my head because they were symbolic. The horns that was coming out my head was symbolic. But then when I started going in, who made you? And the answer was Allah. Then I asked myself a question. He said, Allah made me. How did he make you? Why did he make you? When did he make you? And where did he make you? But he made me fearfully and wonderfully. And he made me to be his strength made manifest. And the way that you become the strength made manifest is that you got to live these laws. You have to live these laws of the prophet. You have to try to say what you mean and mean what you say. Everybody today, I meet a brother 1 month, I meet him another month, and you say, I'm a sheik now, and I'm a top man now, and you still don't even know the prayer. See, when I say know the prayer, I'm talking about being the prayer, because you got agapic love. You got all different kind of love. You have different kind of truths. And what truth are you talking about? Because if you're not working or walking with the truth, then you ain't walking with God. If you don't have a nationality, if you don't have a divine creed, if you call yourself Negro, colored, and black, if you're doing things that's diametrically opposed to what Drew Ali told us, if you got a different nationality card than what Nova Drew Ali bought us, I remember a brother by the name of Scott Hill. And Scott Hill come out of New York. And he was a part of Temple 21 over there. He was the Grand Sheik in Lexington, Kentucky in 1956 when they first started over there. And him and C.M. Bey and a lot of other brothers was close. And Sister Franklin Hill and a lot of old sisters that was with the prophet, they knew the brother. And they was telling us that when a brother or a sister come into the Moorish Science Temple, when you come in, that spirit that you come in with is the spirit that you're going to go out with. And a lot of times you see brothers and sisters come in, you know that they got something else on their mind, because when people come and visit our holy day, They said, man, y'all talking about the David of the light is purity. We talking about the David of the light, and the Goliath of the dark is a big dude, the Philistine, that got armor on. And we have different understanding. The gifts of the understanding are the treasures of Allah. And he appointed to everyone his portion in what measure seemeth good unto himself. Hath he endowed thee with wisdom? Hath he enlightened thy mind with the knowledge of truth? Communicated to the ignorant for their instruction? Communicated to the wise for thine own improvement. True wisdom is less presuming than folly. The wise man doubteth often and changes his mind. The fool is obstinate and doubteth not. He knoweth all things but his own ignorance. Now, to talk much is the foolishness and folly. But if you're talking about the teachings of the prophet, that don't apply to you because you're talking about the truth. But when it say that, it's talking about somebody just running their mouth and not talking about anything. So here in the Moorish Science Temple, Drew Ali gave us Jesus, Muhammad, Buddha, and Confucius, and Moses, and Abraham, and all of these that's part of our line genealogy. He said, will you give him brief the line genealogy through which Jesus came? It says some of the great fathers through which Jesus came are Abraham. And Abraham wasn't always Abraham, just like I wasn't always Bey. He first was Abram, and then he became Abraham. But he became Abraham when he found grace in the eyes of God. So that Ham is that spirit. That Il and Bey is your name, is your resurrection. When you take on that Il, or when you take on that Bey, you're taking on that Ham. You are saying that your earth tasks are done. You are saying that you're conscious. You're conscious who you are and who your forefathers were. And you know that where there's unity, there is strength. But the only way we can come in unity with God, we first must take these teachings and come in unity within ourselves. We have 101 questions. And these 101 questions is known as the Last Supper. It's the one, the O, the one. And that zero, that's the plate. And that food that we eating ham. We eating Abraham. We eating the father of the faithful. And Abraham had a nephew. We ain't going to talk about his brother right now. Abraham, he had a brother named Lot. But now, when we begin to teach about the lesson that Lot gave us, we see how woven we're becoming under somebody else's thought pattern in this government, and we're taking on that, not looking at it, and not understanding that. But you see the Chinese? They're part of the great melting pot, but they still take on the customs, the culture, the heritages, and the traditions of their forefathers. When you find other nationalities, they keep and hold on to the customs, the culture, the heritages, and the traditions of their forefathers. You and me, until we find duality and find the strength made manifest and be that, then we're going to keep on going through the things that we're going through. Like I like to reiterate, I meet a lot of people, and they walk around, and they got the Moorish flag up here, and they never in their life seen a Moorish Holy Quran. And something is wrong with that, because Drew Ali brought us nationality, which is your history, hooking you back up with the family of nations, and he gave you divine creed, which is the highest principles known to man, which is love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice. The key is love. Love is the only savior of the world. And Jesus, son of Mary, came to manifest that love to man. Now be ever mindful of Mary. Be ever mindful of Elizabeth. Be ever mindful that they was cousins, John and Jesus. Be ever mindful that Ruth, the Moabite, who married Boaz, and Anna married Jacqueline, and Boaz and Jacqueline was the pillars which was your forefather. They done took our forefather, buried them in the square. They taking on our name. You look at television, and when you look at the television, whenever they talk about the biblical brothers and sisters, who do they put? They put the European, and you have to understand that. And the reason why you have to understand it, because when you begin to talk about the advent of slavery, and then the Berlin Conference, and the things that transpired, Rome is still working. And every day they are doing what they can to knock out you and me all together. Because right now you said it ain't in the color. It don't make no color what you is. All I know that I'm a child of God and live, that's good. But in this era of time, we have to talk about that. We have to talk about nationality. We just can't get so far up in the spirit that we forget what transpired with us during 7/11 and 1492. And you know, 1492 is the same year that Columbus was supposed to have discovered America. And 1492 is the same time that the last stronghold of the Moors fell in Granada, Spain. So we went in Spain in 7/11. We went in there as Moors. We stayed in there for 700 years, gave Europe civilization. But when we came out of Spain, we came out as Negro, colored, and black. And these are they who we look upon as being a leader, because the foundation began in Rome. The Roman nations found the first church of whom crucified Jesus. So they crucified my Jesus. They crucified him because he was telling the people of a heavenly kingdom and not an earthly kingdom. He was telling them that don't get caught up on things down here, because the time will come that you're going to have to give it up and go with God. So he was telling us about a heavenly kingdom and not an earthly kingdom. So you got a heaven and you got a hell. See, Allah never made a heaven for man. He never made a hell. We are creators and make our own, and we always tell them we're going to pray to God. We look up in the high. We look up in the sky. But the nearest place to meet him is in the heart. And we're not talking about a heart that pumps blood. We're talking about the heart of your mind. So, you know, through silent meditation, Jesus sat beside a flowing spring, and it was a holy day. Every day is a holy day for a holy man. So once the Moorish Americans come back into their right mind, then we're going to save the world. Because the Moorish Science Temple of America have a place for everybody. They have a place for everybody because Drew Ali gave everybody's history in this Moorish Quran. It ain't but 4 chapters in this Moorish Holy Quran that Noble Drew Ali actually wrote himself, 5. But when he wrote them, he's talking about nationality, he's talking about religion, he's talking about divine creed, and he's talking about your forefathers. He's talking about your foremothers. He's talking about your woolly hair. He's talking about things that was taken away from you and somebody else grabbed onto it, and then they're walking around, falsehood, walking around with my clothes on. They done took my fares, they done took my garments, they done took everything from me. We were talking about this the other day in a meeting, and they was talking about the soda, and they was talking about the juice, and they was talking about some wine that was in a freezer, and it was 32 degrees. And I really enjoyed to hear that, because 33 degrees is frozen, and 32nd is frozen. So how can you give me something to drink when it's frozen? But if you give me that which is 365 degrees or 360, then I could drink that because it's moving about. Because we come from where coconuts grow. We come from where fruit grow. The only thing that you see in Europe is wheat, and the only thing that you see in Europe is hay. Africa is the cradle of civilization. What do that mean? Everything that humanity needs, God gave it to us. Now, we also know that the Moroccan Empire extended a lot of different places. And being that the Moroccan Empire extended, then we grabbed everybody in. But when you come in, understand that Drew Ali told the secretary asked Noble Drew Ali, said, we have Japanese and we have Chinese, and they want to join the Moorish Science Temple of America, but what should we put on their nationality card? He said, put ill or put Bey, because the Moabites is the oldest nation on earth. So I was in a meeting last Sunday, and they had brothers that were from Mexico. And when he was speaking about the president in Mexico. And everybody that was at that meeting was of different nationalities. That's what they was talking about. So it's an honor when brothers and sisters come and visit the Moorish Science Temple of America and talk about the conditions of their people from which they come, because all of that is in the Moorish Science Temple of America. Drew Ali bought us all of that. And you said, if you needed any more, I would have bought you that too. He couldn't have did nothing else. A lot of people say, well, Drew Ali didn't bring this, or he didn't bring religion, or he didn't do this because it wasn't time. Yes, it was. When Allah sent Drew Ali, it was in due time. And he came to redeem us from that which was lost. When you begin to talk about certain religions, some religions come out of the West. Some religions come out of the East. Drew Ali say from the East comes all light. And though the sun is hanging at high noon, the blind cannot see. So now you talk about blind cannot see. So now Jesus and Drew Ali, I can bear witness that I was blind and could not see. So they gave me eyes to see. I was deaf and could not hear. They gave me ears to hear. But when I was thinking, when I was a child, about Jesus, and when Jesus was healing the blind and the deaf, I always looked at these lessons literally. So when you go to church and you go there and your understanding elevates you to certain heights, then that means that you're no longer blinded. You no longer deaf. You can hear now. You know, when you hear the word love, you know it's not something that begin in bed or end in bed. You know that it's a principle, that it's a quality, that it's a character. You know, I'm always honored to be able to come before my Portland listening audience. You know, Cason's Meat Market. We have a funeral the first at 10:30 on Williams, his oldest brother passed. If anybody want to come out and do that, come out and pay respects to that brother, because his family is moral and clean. We was over there the other day, and before he opened the store, the first thing he did was say a prayer, and I honored that. So in conclusion, I would like to say, if you have race pride and love your race, join the Moorish Science Temple of America and become a part of this divine movement. Then you will have power to redeem your race, because you'll know who you are and who your forefathers were. Because where there's unity, there is strength. Together we stand, and divided we fall. Come, good people. Because the prophet Noah Drew Ali sent to redeem this nation from mental slavery, which you now have. Need each and every one of you who think that your conditions can be better. This is a field open to strong men and women to uplift the nation and take your place in the affairs of men. If the European and other nations are helping him, why not you? It is your problem. The Negro problem is being solved only as it can, and that is through the Moorish National Divine Movement. If you have a nation, you must have a free national name in order to be recognized by this nation as an American citizen. This is what was meant when it was said, seek ye first the kingdom of heaven and his righteousness, and all these things will be added unto you. At this time I recite the Moorish American prayer, the source from which we draw our strength. Allah, the Father of the universe, the Father of love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice. Allah is my protector, my guide, and my salvation, by night and by day, through his holy prophet, Drew Ali. Amen.